Hi, everyone, and welcome to Fruits Basket Podcast. So today, we're gonna talk about episode 21 and 22, and but today we have a special guest. Her name's Night Owl. Go ahead, say hi.
Hello.
Yeah. So Night Owl's like my best friend, and so we're just gonna do this episode together. Francesca was too busy, so we're gonna have a lot of fun just talking about Fruits Basket. And also, if you haven't know, I'm your host, Kyo. If you haven't listened, or Kyo Anime, Kyo for short. Don't get confused with Kyo Sama. Yeah, good luck. All right, so we have episode 21. Oh, actually, I wanted to mention I'm a manga reader of Fruits Basket, and Night Owl is not, but I've told her a lot of the manga just because I never thought we'd get a reboot. So I was just like, guess what happens in this? So she does know some spoilers, but we'll still save that for the end. Okay, so we're gonna talk about episode 21, which was There Was Definitely was the title. And it starts out with Yuki, baby Yuki. He's so cute.
Very cute.
Yeah. Anyway, but it's like the old maid that we don't know her name, but at the Soma estate, and she's talking about how like the rat is a celebration of being born, and like it's like a really great thing. I mean, it doesn't really say why yet, but and then Yuki comes in with his mom, and his mom is worried because Yuki's so like sickly, and thinks like the head of the family will look down on him because of that. And so she tells Yuki not to cough in front of Akito. And so this is the first time when Yuki and Akito meet. And like right when um, Yuki sees baby Akito, he starts crying. And his mom's like, "How rude! Why are you crying?"
Oh yeah, I was a little surprised to see like Yuki so sickly. I didn't know that. Like that he was so sick as a child.
Yeah, it. I mean, they mentioned in season one how he has like asthma, so it's just kind of a correlation of that. Francesca talked about this before, how it's really weird because I didn't notice till recently that every time like Yuki thinks of Akito or the dark room, that's when he has his attacks. So it's kind of also a mental
Yeah,
problem like
like
later on.
anxiety
Yeah.
related.
Yeah, it's kind of I never noticed that till like even reading the book, I didn't notice that. The anime helped. But like right when Yuki saw Akito, he starts crying, and then the maid explains that even the older Zodiac members, like Sugar Ray and them, cried the first time they saw Akito, and it has to do with their bond. But then Yuki like was having some internal thoughts of like complete opposites. It was like he was like, "Oh, I want to hug the person, but I want to stay away from him too," or from from with Akito. He just felt all these different emotions of like that were reverse of each other, and that's probably why he was crying because he was so well. He said it was like an inner voice in him, which is obviously like the spirit, the rat spirit.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Then we had the bop opening. I love the opening.
It's really good.
I
I
know,
like
I
that.
know, it's so pretty. Okay, so then they talk about Yugi was just like Akito's playmate, and they just played together, and he didn't really think about it much because he was so little. And but then shows Akito kind of get annoyed at Yuki for coughing, but like even though he like yells at Yuki, he like has like afterwards he looks kind of sad about yelling at Yuki.
Mhm.
So it wasn't he wasn't crazy yet.
Yeah.
But then it even talks about how Yuki saw Akito crying sometimes, and he didn't know why. But he did say that Shigure would usually comfort Akito, or he would see Shigure comforting Akito as a child whenever he would cry. And then he just says all of a sudden, the one day Akito became twisted, and that was when it shows Akito in the room, like painting with black paint, and he says like the the world's black, and he starts saying I'm black and all this really like crazy stuff, and he's telling Yuki like, oh, you're black too, because oh, I didn't mention this. The beginning, like when he was normal, like the folktale, like said somehow like God and the rat are close because the rat was the first one to the banquet, and that's why the rat is so like special in the family. So Akito was like, "Oh, you're black too because we're so alike." And then he stopped and he kind of thought about it, and he was like, "Actually, we're nothing alike. Actually, I was chosen. Like I'm the chosen one, like the god, and so you're just a toy your mom gave me." And then Yuki started thinking about how his mom's not really letting him like go home and always being with Akito.
Mm-hmm.
And so Yuki started realizing that what Akito was saying was pretty much the truth of like his mom just leaving him there. And that's crazy. Like sad too.
Yeah, it definitely explains like Yuki's relationship with his mother.
Yeah. And also Akito goes into like everyone hates the rat already. Like he drags that on more later, but he already starts telling him that. And then Yuki also notices like how he never really interacts with any of the other zodiacs at all. And like he's always just with Akito. And then even he's never even talked to Ayame, and it's like his brother.
Mm-hmm.
He's just walking, and there's these two ladies that are like, "Oh, the cat is outside, like staring into the window." And Yuki's like, "Oh, the cat." So he walks out, and it's like the first time that Kyo and Yuki ever meet. So, and I love Yuki, he's just like, "Oh, he has such pretty orange hair," and I'm like, "Oh, it's
That's
so."
cute.
I know. I was like, "Oh," but then of course, like Kyo sees him, and Kyo's like, "Are you the rat?" And he's like, "Yeah." And Kyo just starts yelling at him because like he starts blaming the rat for everything that's happened to him, which he pretty much is thinking about his mom's suicide and just blaming Yuki for like being the rat, which a lot of people kind of did like in
Mm-hmm.
the Zodiac.
Yeah.
So because the rat's supposed to be like a trickster or whatever, but also like or can be cunning, but like but yet charismatic. So it's like, oh, it's all your fault just because he's the rat. That's the only reason.
Yeah. I
Um,
always think that's kind of unfortunate that like they're real people, but they're blamed for the spirits inside of them.
yeah. And again, I feel like it's just part of the curse,
Mm-hmm.
really. So this is like the one part I remember reading and also just watching it recently, where like I'm like, really, Kyo? Like I love you, Kyo, but like why'd you? I mean, I'm not mad because he was a kid, but that's the one part where I'm like, you could have just held back a little bit because it's like poor Yuki. But since Kyo like starts yelling at him, and I think he's when he tells him to like just disappear. So Yuki comes to his mom, and he's like crying because he was just told to disappear, and his mom just comes around and slaps him in the face, and is like, "Go back to Akito." And I'm always like, was it like she was embarrassed of him crying in front of like who she was standing there? Like, why did she like just slap him out of nowhere?
Yeah, it kind of seemed like that. Like she was embarrassed that she had to like
Actually, mother
not
him?
know, yeah, actually mother and she didn't know where he went. Like it could have been that like Akito was like, "You where did Yuki go?" And she's like,
Oh, yeah,
"I don't know."
that makes sense.
She kind of gets like annoyed at any sort of inconvenience with him. So
Yeah. Yuki goes back to Akito, and Akito keeps telling Yuki, like, it's a black world, you won't be saved, stop deluding yourself. And eventually it shows Yuki starts to believe those words because he hears it so often. Then it shows Yuki is he's walking into the halls again, and there's these two ladies, and they're talking about how Yuki's parents pretty much sold him to Akito, but yet in the Soma's family eyes, they're like winners because they have like all this money and reputation because of the rat.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it shows Yuki in a car, or in a limo, looks like a really fancy car, and his mom, and they're like, "Oh, how's school, Yuki?" And he doesn't say anything, and his mom's just like, "Oh, well, he has no opinions, and he's going to the best school, like better than the other Zodiacs they're going to." And while they're talking, he sees like, I think it's Haru, Kyo, Momiji, and Kagura. Like they're all playing outside
Mm-hmm.
and walking to school. And of course, he's like probably wants to join them, but he can't. I remember on Twitter, some people are like, "Oh, I didn't know it was the Somas." Like he saw, they thought it was just kids playing, and I was like, "No,
Yeah, it was.
it was them." So then it goes to Yuki at school, and he says he didn't interact with anyone because he was afraid that they wouldn't like him, and didn't really know how to interact. But eventually, he had two kids come up to him, and they're like, "Let's go play soccer." And he was like, and they're like, "Yeah, let's be friends." Like, and he's just like, it's all happy because he has friends, and he like
Mhm.
shows them playing soccer. Apparently, some of the friends were Somas, like probably the outside Somas,
Uh,
and they were playing. And that's when he bumped into a girl, and it kind of goes all the way back to episode like 2 or 3, where it talks about that. And then because he bumped into a girl and it was Somas, they had to get their memories erased. I'm pretty sure if if it wasn't Somas, they'd probably still get their memories erased. Then it showed also Yuki like asking Hattori like not to erase their memories. And he's like, "That's my first friend." And dang, Hattori was like hot back then too.
yeah, he was styling.
I know. Tori's like always looking good though. So then the next day at school or next week, whatever, his friends completely like walk past him because they lost their memories. Then he's walking home from school and the hat comes flying by, and actually we find out it's Kyo's hat, and he's running after the hat, and then he looks up and Yuki has the hat because he like just picked it off the ground, and he's about to give it to Kyo, and then Kyo just runs away because he doesn't want it. Like that's what he says later, because Yuki touched it. Anyway. But then it shows Kazuma like hugging or picking him up, Kyo. Anyway, and then once Yuki sees that, he goes back to his, I don't know, place where he stays at the Soma State, and he starts thinking like how he really wishes he had a family or friends or just a place where people wouldn't distance themselves from him. And that's when he starts crying. And dude, the voice actor, and that was like so good, crying. So then Yuki, because of everything that's happened to him, he starts to become sicker, and he says like he doesn't know if it was physically or mentally or both, probably both.
Mm.
And so Akito's like, "Can I visit him and come in and talk to him, make him feel better?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, you're so kind." So Akito goes in to see Yuki, and he's just like, "Are you gonna die, Yuki?" And he's smiling when he's saying that. And then he just tells Yuki about Kyo's mom committing suicide, and then says how Kyo hates him. And then he brings up Haru and how Haru hates him because he's made him a laughing stock, or the rat did. Yeah, so then he goes back to like thinking everyone hates him, and he falls asleep. And when Yuki wakes up, he's remembering about the hat. So he goes up and grabs the hat from a drawer, and he's like, "I should probably return this to Kyo, but he probably won't take it back." Then he starts having like really dark thoughts, like how the world would be better without him and no one would be sad. And I'm just like, No, don't have those thoughts.
Especially for such a young kid.
He does put on the hat and like looks in a mirror at himself, and that's when he starts having those like doubtful thoughts. But then like as he's thinking that he breaks the mirror and like runs out. And then we have like future Yuki like narrating. And he said like he doesn't know what came over him. He just wanted to like run, escape. That he maybe it was just he didn't want to give up. So he just kept running. Eventually he ended up hearing Kyoko. And that part was kind of funny. I like out of all the episode. Kyoko was freaking out because she missing Toru and the police that are there, and they're like, "We need a description." And she's like, "She's a cute little girl, and she has cute little clothes, and she has cute." She says like, all these cute things,
Yeah.
and they're like,
basically, she's cute.
"Yeah." She's like, "Well, I'll go look for her." And they're like, "No, stay here, ma'am." Then Yuki like remembers passing a little girl, so he's like, "Oh, that must have been her." So he goes back. So he ran back and saw her, and she's crying. And he's like, "Oh, I better go tell that lady." So he starts running. He looks behind him, and Toru's like running after him, and he's like, "Oh, why is she following me?" And he's like, "I can't get close to girls." And but then she trips, and he realizes that like she's really depending on him right now, and that she needs him, or she'll be lost. So he starts running, and he'll like stop, and so she can like figure out which road he went down, and then he'll run again. I just thought of a joke. He was like a rat in a maze. But he finally gets in front of their apartment, and he puts the hat on Toru, and she looks up, and he's gone. And so Toru starts crying, and Kyoko's like sitting outside, and she's like, "Oh, Toru," and they have their reunion, touching, and Yuki's like exhausted from running, and so he turned into a rat, and so yeah, that's another reason she probably couldn't see him because he was a rat. Maybe she would just see clothes on the sidewalk if she did see him. But then Yuki's like, "Oh, I was useful for once," and he does his little rat tears.
The little rat tears are so cute.
Yeah, he cries little rat tears of joy, I guess, or relief. Yeah, he was just so happy that someone needed him in
Mhm.
some moment.
He did some good for someone.
Yeah, and it just kind of broke all of what Akito was saying in a way about how he's just worthless. So then he came back to the Soma estate, and he's all tired. So they're like, "Get the doctor!" And he sees Akito, and that's when he's said something along the lines like, "The world does have darkness, but it's not all darkness." So then we go back to present using Yuki. He's sitting with Kakeru, and so I love this part because Kakeru is just like, "What do you want to say? You've been sitting here like really quiet the whole time." So in other words, that whole story he wasn't telling Kakeru.
Makes sense though, because it kind of involves things that he shouldn't know.
True. Yeah, the curse and stuff. He does tell Kakeru that he was in isolation and was abandoned by his parents. He kind of just says that. And then he talks about how he met Toru when they were little, and he didn't know it was the same girl, like when he met her, like in present day or when they're in high school, until he saw the hat. Then he just talks about how Toru pretty much was the reason that he kept living. Like he did get like weak again, but she came into his life again and kind of just was always by his side and accepted him. Also, he talks about how he really like the first time he met Kyo, he actually wanted them to be friends,
Mhm.
and because of the misunderstandings, like they're not. And I'm always like, they could have been friends. Like it's so sad.
Yeah. I feel like their entire relationship is like misunderstandings and not understanding each other.
It's like Kimi needs to okay all over
that
again.
that anime is all blushing and
I
misunderstandings.
know. Bromance of Kimi.
Yep.
I'm kidding. Yuki just like admit that he like rejected the world to protect himself, which makes sense. Like now knowing about Yuki, like being told all of like he's worthless and everyone hates him, it makes sense that he's not really sociable.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get the M bomb. What the fandom was, the manga people were waiting for. We called it the M bomb because he was like, "I love her like a mother," and then all the Toru and Yuki ships were like, "No."
Oh,
But yeah, they kind of held on to that like for one more episode, which I thought was funny.
I think they did a pretty good job of doing that.
Yeah, because in the manga, it's like he's like, "I love her like a mom," and then it tells the whole like flashback, and then it explains why.
Mm.
So you're not sitting there like, "What? How does he love her like a mom?" for like a week if you're watching it weekly. Yeah. Um, that episode was really good. I'm trying to remember if I cried or not the first time. I feel like I cried. I think when Yuki cried, like really hard. I
Mm.
just felt really bad for him. But that was it. But it wasn't like, it was just like tear.
Yeah, I teared up a little bit during that episode. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was. It just kind of I felt
You can, a lot of people, even though like, I'm not saying like everyone's suicidal or anything, but a lot of people can relate to Yuki like in small ways because
yeah.
he's such a developing character that usually at some point you can be like, oh, I get you, Yuki. So I remember like when I found out I was born the year of the rat, I was like, and I was the whole Kyo freak. I still am, but I was like, oh, I'm a rat. But now I'm like, yeah, Yuki. Oh yeah, and the night owl is the year of the cow
Mhm.
or ox, and that's beautiful because she loves Haru.
Yes. I am a Haru fan. Yep.
But I ship her with Kakeru. Just because his energy, I think she likes. But like, she's still getting to know Kakeru, so it's okay. What was that episode?
Was that the same episode? At the end, Kakeru and Yuki, they're like kicking the soccer ball at each other.
That's the next episode.
Okay, okay,
So we're about to get to that.
okay. I couldn't remember.
Good segue.
They're getting blended in my head.
And that's good though, because it means the story's like going smoothly. The next episode, it was episode 22, and it's called "This Isn't What I Want." Before I started talking about this episode felt so fast to me, but it's okay. Like me and someone on Twitter were talking about how the old anime, it didn't tell the whole story, obviously, but like the way it was paced was a little better because you could feel the emotions more. For this one, it's like they have to get everything in,
Mm-hmm.
and the emotions are still there, but they're like really like forced and like and they're gone. So like it's not like you feel it longer. It's just kind of like boom, and then it's done.
Yeah.
We start out with on episode 22 with Yuki and flashback of when he first met Toru, as in when she was living in a tent. He even mentions that like the first time he saw her, he was just like, she was that weird classmate that was living in a tent. Like when he invited her to stay at Shigure's house, it was actually because he wanted to like rebel against the Somas or the family. But then he talks about the curse and when he turned into a rat one time, and she said like even if her memories get erased, she still wants to be friends with him, and that's helped him a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We go back to Kakeru and Yuki sitting on the stairs outside, and Kakeru's just like doesn't really get what he means by like Toru being a mother to him. He's just like, that's kind of weird. And I just wrote here, it makes sense because Yuki never had like parental love.
Mhm.
So he talks about how it just felt like she accepted him, and it shows like when Toru covered up Hiro and Kisa and Momiji like a blanket, and it switches them with Yuki as a child. She's like covering him up with a blanket, and I like that whole transition. I don't know, it was really cool. And then he mentions how that must have been how Reen felt, and it was because she says it was just someone she could tell all her flaws to and like cry to. So then Cocker is still like not convinced, and which I don't blame him because the shippers are probably not convinced either of Yuki Toru shippers. So he's like, even though she's our age, then Yuki realizes. I don't think he says it out loud because it wouldn't make sense, but he says that like the night Kyo transformed is when he started to realize that he liked her like a mom. She seemed like a woman to him more than a girl when she ran after Kyo to help him. So, but he was embarrassed by the fact that he was realizing this, and so he just like shut it off, and as he was saying, close the lid. Other words, like all his feelings he was gonna say, and so he pretended he didn't even realize it, and like that's why he like flirt with her because he was trying to like block out that thought.
Mhm.
Kind of weird, but
kind of change the feeling, but it was awkward. Yeah.
yeah, he even said it was like it felt wrong. But then Cocker's like, it's not that bad really, because usually like some people look for a partner similar to their mom. So he's like, so you sure you're just not giving up because Kyo? And that's when Yuki's like, no, that's not it. And he says how Kyo obviously likes her, like he can tell just by his eyes. And he's like, and she likes him. And I'm just like, yep. But Yuki goes on to talk about he did look up to Kyo for certain things, like you know how Kyo can connect with people, but he says he wants to find his own special meaning in life. Like he doesn't want to copy someone else's,
Yeah.
and that part, it's like he's like so passionate about it. I was like, yeah, Yuki, that's my son. Growing up. Then Kaku's like says, I've never met anyone who wants to live so desperately. And then he throws the ball in Yuki's face. And then Yuki throws it back. And then they're kicking the ball back and forth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah, that's real bros.
Yeah.
Dude.
Oh, when I was watching that part, I don't know, I made this like weird connection to the previous episode where he was playing soccer with like those friends, and he felt like I don't know that Yuki and Kakeru come like really really close, but like someone he can talk to and like a friend.
Yeah. And I never thought about the soccer thing. That's kind of cool.
Just like a random thing.
That is, yeah. Maybe Yuki should join the soccer team. I'm kidding. No,
I don't know that kick where he almost like
kicked it
over the fence. I was like, Yuki, got a leg there.
I mean, he can kick down a door, so he's got to have a leg. But while they're like kicking balls at each other, I don't know if it's one ball because they had one ball, and the animation makes it like 5. Kimi comes up and just punches Kakeru in the side, and he falls to the ground. No one cares that he's on the ground, and Kimi's just like, yeah, I came to find you, Yuki. Are you feeling better? And Yuki's like, what? Like he completely forgot he was feeling. And he's like, oh yeah. And then that's when he kind of says that like it must be because he said something that he's never told anyone else to someone, or it's because Kakeru is a nice guy, and that's kind of like what you were talking about, is just someone he can talk to, like as a friend. Kimi finds out they were talking about something, and she's like, what was it? And Kakeru's like, painful stuff, and she's like, oh. And they're like, no, not perverted stuff. Like, and Yuki's like, why do you guys always think it's that? And Kakeru's like, we love that stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Anyway, so then they're walking back into the school, and Kimi's like talking to someone else. So Kakeru and Yuki start talking again. Oh, he asks Yuki why hasn't he told Toru, well, how he feels towards Toru about the whole mother thing.
Mhm.
And Yuki says he didn't want to tell her because he still gotta like live together for a little longer, and she worries about everyone, which is so true. So, oh, and then Kakeru was like, "But it's okay to burden me," and he's like, "Was it a burden?" And he's like, he stops for like 5 seconds to think if it was a burden, and he's like, "Oh," he's like, "Oh, such a burden." Ah.
So dramatic.
Yeah. So then we get a little scene at Shigure's house because there's Toru on the floor in the kitchen with Shigure crying because she's like, I have so many lines. I don't think I can remember all these lines for the stepsister and Cinderella play. And Shigure doesn't know the play, so he like takes it, looks at the script, and he's like, ooh. And he's looking at it and he's like, oh, Kyo's the prince? And she's like, oh yeah. She's like, yeah. And then he starts cracking up and he's like, oh, I gotta go watch this.
Oh no.
And Kyo comes in and he's just like, Toru. And it's like, she's like, ah. And yeah, he's like, why are you showing that to Shigure? And he confiscates it. Kyo walks out with like script in his hand, and Toru chases after him like, no, I need the script. I need to learn my lines. He's like, don't look at this while you're in the house. He's like, and you better not tell Kazuma. And then she like looks away at the ground, and she's like, okay. And then and he's like, look at me with the eyes when you say that. And then she like tries to grab the script, and he's just moving it like out of her way, and she's really slow. And he even's like, huh, you're too slow. And yeah, they're flirting. Is what's happening. But anyway, and and so she starts to like yell like, I'm the evil stepsister, and he's like, I'm a bully. And then he puts a book on her head, and he's like, you're the one getting bullied here. And then and then my favorite part, Yuki just appears like in the doorway, and he's like, excuse me. And they're like, ah. And then Yuki's like, can I please get inside? And Kyo's face the whole time, he's like, disgusted that Kyo or that Yuki saw them. And he's like, how long were you there? And he's like, too long. So then Toru's gonna give Yuki his script because he's like, can I have one too? Or he's like, have mine. He's like, yeah, I have yours. And then Kyo starts walking up to his room, and then Shigure's like, Toru, your pot's boiling over. And
Oh, Shigure.
and so I don't know why I said that so country. Your pot's boiling over. And so Toru goes out of the room. And so Yuki says to Kyo or gets his attention, and Kyo looks back and he's like, what? And Yuki talks about the hat, like hats directly. And he's just like, that hat, Toru has it, so you don't want it back? Or you don't need it. I'm guessing you don't need it back.
Mm.
And then Kyo just gives Yuki a really like, I don't know, not mad, but like weird look.
Yeah.
And Toru comes back and she's like, supper's ready. And Yuki's like, okay, I'll eat first. And Kyo's like, I'll go upstairs, I'll eat later. And whenever Kyo eats later, it means something's wrong. So Toru looks worried, and Yuki says something along the lines of, oh, maybe I shouldn't have brought that up, or he doesn't want to talk about that for some reason. And but he says he's gonna have to get his act together soon because I don't know what's gonna happen if he doesn't. And then he grabs Toru's hand and they go to the living room to eat. He mentions how he just wants Toru to be happy and to be able to find a place where she can be herself and also be like able to complain. Oh, and also there's this like really small scene where like he's talking about that and it shows Kyo like in his room in the dark and he's like looking down at his hands and yeah, I can't talk about that part because spoilers. But oh, also Yuki says when Toru can finally find that place where she can be herself, that's when he thinks he can tell her how he feels about her. And then we get a random scene where it cuts to Aya and they're gonna make the costumes for the play. And Yuki called them personally, which was like just shows Yuki and Aya are getting along good. They actually called him. So then they're at their play practice, getting ready for the play, and Toru can't say her mean lines.
I was wondering how that was gonna go. Just because she's like the least mean person, unless she's like really worked up. And even
like,
then, like
when she's mean, it's more like just determination.
yeah, she's not like deliberately mean. Yeah.
So she's like crying and she's supposed to be yelling at Hanajima saying she's gonna get no dinner. And she's like, Hanajima's like, oh, I'm so happy you cried for me. Like, it's so sweet. I always forget her name. I wrote her last name. It's like Kinoshita? Kinoshita?
Kinoshita.
Yeah, it's her last name. But she's the Yuki's fan club girl
Yeah.
with the pigtails. She's like yelling at them, like, you gotta be meaner than that. And she's the stepmother. So Yuki comes up and he's like, wow, you're so passionate about this part. And gives that Prince smile and she's just like like I think she had a nosebleed. I don't know.
Yeah.
And she runs away. She's like, don't look at me, Yuki. But then Toru's like, oh, I'll try harder and try to like memorize my lines and be mean. And she's like, I'll even go with no dinner if I need to. And she's like, and I have to do it to show like my gratitude to Aya and Mine for the costumes. And then it goes to like a little flashback where Aya and Mine come in to Yuki and they're like, we're here to make the costumes or to help you in the measurements. And everyone finds out that's Yuki's big brother and they're like, what? Yuki's like, no outsiders are allowed in the school. How did you guys get in here? And Aya's like, oh, nothing can separate our love or whatever. And then apparently they got permission from the principal. And then it's kind of crazy. Like that scene is crazy.
Yeah.
There's like 5 people talking at once. Aya being his crazy self, which is beautiful, and Mine wanting to dress up every girl there. But then Hana does ask Mine to make her a black dress, and first the students are like weirded out by it, but then Mine is like, "Ooh, yes, pure black. I like it." So then it goes back to the play practice, and Toru's still saying like she's gonna try so hard. There's this random girl who's like, I'll rewrite the whole thing, and she like rips the part apart. I'm like, you go, girl. I mean, like, if you more power to you. And they're like, are you sure we can do that? And then they mention there's another class that's like, I don't know what play it was because I don't know if it was I think it was a Japanese play, but like they said like they're gonna have a play, but 2 of the people in it are supposed to be boys, they're gonna be girls. So they were like, it'd be like Charlie. I think it's supposed to be like I think the manga was like the Three Musketeers, but with girls. So I don't know if that's what it was because it was a Japanese title in the sub.
Yeah, I don't remember what it said.
But anyway, so they're like, "Oh, that sounds so cool. Why can't we do that?" And they're like, "Are they gonna have the open bath scene?" And Yuki's like, "I don't think the school would allow that."
I don't think they'd allow that regardless.
I know. Oh, and so they're gonna rewrite the script, but then Toru asks if they do rewrite it, if they could rewrite it the Prince parts too to be rewritten so it can match Kyo better. and then he might come to rehearsal. Apparently, he doesn't come, and and his friends and who are like, "Yeah, I wanted to see him and laugh at him acting." And Yuki's like, "Well, no wonder he's not coming." But I was like, "Oh, Tori's even think of Kyo, like to help him get in, to the play. Ship it." Anyway, but she's about to go look for Kyo, and Yuki's like, "Nah, it's okay. I'm heading to the student council room anyway, so I'll find him." Then we have like a voiceover of Kyo, and when he's younger, and he's talking about the hat and how he doesn't want to like take it back because Yuki touched it. And then Yuki finds him. He's not on the roof, but he's like in the stairway of the roof, so close enough. So Yuki was like had the right hunch. And he's like, "Why are you sulking here?" And he's like, "Go, they're all waiting for you." Kyo's like, "I'm not doing that stupid play." He's like, "You're there, you piss me off." And he's like, "Well, why don't you talk to me directly about that?" And then Yuki was like, "You're making everyone worry." And he's like, "Do you like to make Toru worry too?" And then Kyo snaps at him, like starts yelling. It's because he's like, "Don't involve her in this." Then Kyo talks about, or yells at him about how like he knows nothing and he had a pampered life and he had a mom and a dad and he was always like got everything he wanted and all this stuff. And now we know that's not true because of Yuki's story. We've already learned.
Kind of where you see that misunderstanding so much. Like Yuki wants what Kyo has, like that social aspect and everything, and Kyo wants what Yuki has, but
Like by being accepted by the clan, kind of.
yeah, and like, but Kyo doesn't know like exactly what Yuki went through with like his parents and everything.
Yeah.
So like it doesn't even, yeah. So yeah, just like misunderstanding each other and
While Kyo's yelling all this, Yuki just slowly like kind of turns around and gives him like this face of like I don't know how to explain it, but like really, like you actually think that like kind of face. And then Kyo has a voice in his head, and it says like, "Do you really believe that?" And then the voice says, "You wouldn't want not having anyone to hate, right?" When Kyo thinks of that, he gets like really mad and punches the window really fast and makes a hole in the window. And it shows his hand bleeding, and he just like sticks it in his pocket and walks away. And then this girl and Machi come up to Yuki, and the girl's like, "Oh, hi Yuki," and they start talking about this school festival. Oh, and she's also like, "What happened with the window?" And he's like, "It's nothing." She's like, "Oh, I'm so excited to see your play." She's like, "I wish you were the prince though, because obviously that would been like the best part for you, because you're so prince-like." And then she's like, "Don't you agree, Machi?" And Machi's like, "No, Yuki's nothing like a prince," and just walks away. And then the girl's like, "Oh, rude." Like and then she says how Machi like usually like talks down on people and like is like that, and she just does it for attention. But then it shows Yuki and he's all like, I don't know, just makes a face of like, "No one's ever said that. Like I'm not like a prince. That's weird." And then we get our last scene, which I love this scene. And we have Toru is in the room like by herself, a classroom, and he opens the door and he's like, "Where is everybody?" And he's like, "Oh, they went home." He's like, "Did you wait for me?" And then she's like, "Oh, yeah, I wanted to give you the script. It's so good. It's rewritten. And so you can play the prince part. It's way easier for you. And my part's easier, except for it's just because I'm really bad at acting." And then Kyo starts thinking, like, what was she thinking while she was by herself, like, waiting for him? Toru notices that like his hand is bleeding, so she's like, "Oh no, you're injured." But then all of a sudden, like Kyo like almost puts his head down on her shoulder, and he comes back and then gives her that look, and I'm like, yeah, he gives him that look.
It was good.
It was good.
That was a good look.
Yeah.
and then puts his head on her shoulder, and she's just like, she's like blushing, doesn't know what's going on. When he puts his head down, he says like, "Okay, I'll do it," and takes the script, and then so Naida actually knows some Japanese, a lot actually, but so I asked her because in the manga, it's like translated as Kyo says, "I give up," and then he takes the script. Where in the sub it just said like, I don't think it said "I give up." It said like, um, "Okay, I'll do it." Um, and according to uh, the author, like when he said that line, it wasn't just like he gave up, like not doing the play and he's gonna do it. It was also like he was trying to like say, like convince himself that he couldn't feel this way for Toru, and he still feels like that afterwards, but he's like kind of surrendering that he knows he feels that way. Kind of a big deal, but not really. Anyway, so he says like, "You better not laugh at me," and he's like, "Let's go home." And then he walks out the door, and Toru's blushing, and like she wipes her face, and she's like, "Okay," and then they leave, and I'm like, "Same girl." Yeah, and that was episode 22. Yeah, I like that episode. Trying to think of I mean, favorite part obviously is anything of Kyo, but I did notice this one thing that's probably not a big deal. It's just me looking into things too deeply, like I always do. Where like when Yuki was little and innocent, like before, well, not innocent, before he started like feeling really suicidal thoughts and everything, he was like wearing a sweater, and like the gray sweater. And then when it showed him when he was like at his worst, when he was really sick, he didn't have the sweater on because I guess probably too hot. But he's like in just a white shirt. And recently, like Yuki in the present, I've noticed like when he wears his sweater, like there was a part, I think it was 2 episodes ago, or 2 episodes, 1 or 2 episodes, where like he just becomes like much happier. And I don't know if the sweater has to do anything with it. I don't know if it's like the sweater
I
power.
feel that. I can't wait for sweater weather, man. I feel happier in a sweater.
I noticed that today, and I was like, it's like you with the soccer. I never. You looked really deep. You look really deep into this for stupid reasons. Anyway, so thanks a lot, guys, for listening. We're gonna do at least 2 more episodes, which is kind of sad and crazy. That's all that's left for season 2. Don't know when season 3 is coming, so we'll see. So just catch us next time. We usually do on Saturdays. And if not, just listen on YouTube. YouTube's awesome. You can find, like, in the description where if you want to listen live, there's a link to my Discord. So see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.
I know you know some spoilerish stuff. So if you want to do a spoiler section, we can. But I don't know if you know what you want to talk about. I really like how they showed Shigure and Akito for like they're supposed to, but it was good because and that helped with I know other people who haven't read the manga who are like really into it. They're like, wow, Shigure and Akito is actually closer than I thought because of that, just because of that small scene. It was like, oh, I'm pretty sure I told you about Machi, right? No,
What about?
no, I haven't told you about Machi.
No.
I mean, I kind of know, but I'm not sure exactly what.
Do you know what happens with Machi, like in the future? Do you know relationship wise what happens with Machi?
With Yuki, right?
Okay. I don't know if I told you that.
Yes, I know that.
Okay.
But I was like, is there something else?
Yeah. So anytime I see Machi, even like the smallest little interaction, I'm like, oh. I'm like, oh. I love people already starting to like ship them, even though they barely have talked to each other. Some people though think he's gonna end up with Kimi or ship him with Kimi, and I'm just like, okay.
She's a little insane.
Yeah. And then there's a lot of people who ship Kakeru and Yuki, which I get.
I get that one, yeah. That's kind of funny.
It's like the Yuki's really shippable with like it's a Yuki harem. Thinking about it. Like before the mom bomb, it was like Toru Yuki, and then there's Haru Yuki, and now there's Kakeru Yuki, Machi Yuki. So Yuki has the harem
Yeah.
of ships. I think it's because he's like the pretty boy.
Yeah. He kind of has that feminine, manly
Yeah.
vibe. Yeah.
So it makes sense. So thanks a lot, guys, for listening. We're gonna do at least 2 more episodes, which is kind of sad and crazy. That's all that's left for season 2. Don't know when season 3 is coming, so we'll see. So just catch us next time. We usually do on Saturdays, and if not, just listen on YouTube. YouTube's awesome. You can find like in the description where if you want to listen live, there's a link to my Discord. So see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.